Hi, this is Mike Young with Noble Warriors. Mobilize your men to meet the needs spectrum in your church. Presented by Jim Grady, a field trainer with the New Commandment Men's Ministries headquartered in Bloomfield, Colorado. This challenge was presented at the Iron Sharpens Iron Men's Conference in Fredericksburg, Virginia on March 19, 2011. My prayer is that this message will encourage you in your walk with Christ and better equip you to lead your family.
My name is Jim Grady. I'm here representing New Commandment Men's Ministry, and as I'll talk a little bit later, I'm here because I was able to start this type of ministry at my church, and it's been a great blessing for us and a great ministry for the guys in the church. There are currently more than 400 churches. Oh, better turn this on, huh? We're having some technical difficulties here, folks. There we go. There are currently over 400 churches in the U.S. that are doing this type of ministry. There are actually a couple, one in Australia and one in New Zealand, and there are actually some churches in Thessaloniki, Greece that are looking at this ministry. So it's really starting to grow. It took 5 years to get to 100 churches, and now it started in 2003, so doing math in public, it's 8 years. We're up to over 400 and like to get to 1,000 or more soon. You may have heard them on Focus on the Family recently. There was an interview with Herb Reese, the founder of New Commandment Men's Ministry, on the February 28th. And I'll show you a link at the end, but you can listen to that interview in a podcast on iTunes. If you search for Focus on the Family daily broadcast, you can select that one and a bazillion other ones there too. So let me see what's going here. Okay. One of the things that we find with this ministry is that churches include members of long-term needs. They're widows, widowers, single parents, orphans, and they're starting to fall through the cracks because we're not good at dealing with people with long-term needs. You know, a service day on a Saturday isn't going to make the problem go away. These needs persist day after day after day after day. And we're not prepared for the issues to not be solved. You know, we pray, and things will get fixed immediately. But what they really need is we need to be committed to them, and what they don't need is for a physical need to be met. What they need is for us to show them the love of Christ. That's what's going to help them through their needs. So the birth of an idea was that to establish teams of men who would regularly provide support for those in the church with long-term needs. This was started by Pastor Herb Reese. He began a ministry to widows and widowers and single moms in his own church and did this for many years, and then finally in 2003 decided he would go into full-time helping other churches provide this type of ministry. It started when he was a pastor in Quincy, Illinois, and there was a young couple, Dan and Teresa, who he married, and within a year, Dan died of cancer. And Teresa was coming to church. You know, they did a dinner and so on, and did a funeral. And Teresa was coming to church, so they thought she was doing okay. After a few months, he went to visit her and found out that she'd been crying herself to sleep on the living room floor every night since Dan had died. She could not go back in the bedroom. And realized, you know, we're supposed to be this bastion of love, and we've done nothing for her. So the guys in his church have been asking to put a men's ministry together. And he did some looking around and found another church in Montana that was doing this type of ministry, where they build teams of men to go help people month after month after month after month. So I'll probably repeat myself a lot, but that's the key to this ministry, is it is relationship-based. It is not trying to, fix the faucet or rake the leaves, just that. But you have a long-term commitment to this person. And it is that types of commitment that makes a difference in their lives. The thing that the event at which Herb decided to make this his full-time ministry is when his sister's husband died at age 48, and he did a funeral at the church and said, you know, if this is typical for most churches, you're going to forget my sister. Don't forget my sister. And they started a men's ministry, and they're still going strong. She still has a team with them. And that's what led him to decide, well, we need to help other churches start this type of ministry. For my own involvement, I heard her speak at a church in our town when I was visiting there. And he talked about how, the Bible says we need to help widows, aliens, orphans. It's very clear. There's a lot of passages on that. But I was always overwhelmed by that. How can I possibly do that? And this was a very practical and doable approach to solving that problem. My wife, being the more proactive one of the two of us, signed us up for his newsletter, and eventually I got it started at our church. We've been doing it at our church for about 5 years, and it's still going strong. And there's been some people who have graduated. They've moved on. They don't need a team anymore. And there's some guys who've moved out of the ministry, and others have come in. But it's been for us, it's been very fulfilling and very, very satisfying that way. I am a lay person. I have a separate day job, and that's the other nice, powerful thing about this ministry. It is so simple. It takes 3 hours once a month. It's what we're asking the guys to commit to. And for me, it's that plus a few emails and preparing a devotional time beforehand, as I'll get into later. So it's quite sustainable for the long term, which, since we're trying to meet long-term needs, is what we really need to have happen. So, as we said in the introduction, we're going to talk about the needs spectrum. And there are many different types of needs within the church. There are special project needs. There are emergency special project needs, long-term needs, and catastrophic long-term needs. The first one we would classify as, that's not really a pressing need. It's a felt need, certainly. The others are more pressing, and I will describe those more in detail. There's a chart here that describes them here on your handout. Okay. Special project needs, it's a one-time call for help. Okay? Can you send some men over to help me move? You see that a lot in churches. You get a phone call. We're trying to get the guys together to help with somebody has a special need. Emergency special needs, it's a one-time need for help. That is more of an emergency. It involves a danger to life and or property. So I'm being evicted on Monday. I'll lose my possessions if I don't get help moving. That's something that's more pressing. Long-term needs, people with disabilities or whose normal social relationships have been severed, divorce, being widowed, being orphaned. One care receiver that my boys and I help, the husband has Alzheimer's, and it's pronounced dementia, and there's a severing of a relationship there between the husband and the wife because he's not the same guy he was, and there's a long-term need for them where they can't get out like they used to be able to do, and they can't get work done around their house. So that's how we're helping them. Then there are catastrophic long-term needs. So this is a life-altering event that results in total dependence. The example here, this is a true example, by the way. A woman showed up at a church in Connecticut and said, "My husband is in prison and I'm dying of cancer. I have 12 children. Can you help me?" And what we have seen is that churches that are able to meet the long-term needs are then enabled better to meet all the other needs in the spectrum. And that's why we're focusing on that. Hi, Joe. So let's see. Okay. So special project needs. One of the things that you can, these are frequently, people are often just looking for cheap labor, right? It's, again, can you help me move? Or I got a leaky faucet, or my pipes are leaking, and there's a plumber in the church. I'll call the church and ask them to see if they can send the plumber over to help me. They find out it's $200 for them to hire a plumber, but maybe Joe can help me as a plumber. There's a member of New Commandments Board who is a mechanic, and he says he hates working for Christians because they expect it to be free or greatly discounted. Well, he's got to feed his family too, right? And the church is not obligated to meet those kinds of needs. Our job is to meet our own needs as best we can. And in many cases, it's not just to provide cheap labor for us. One thing is, now I may have a friend who is a plumber, and there's no problem with me going on the basis of that relationship and asking him to help me fix a pipe, right? But it's very different for me to call the church and expect the church to get that labor for me or to help me move or whatever. So the problem is it's really hard to say no, right? And that's what you end up having to do, is because we feel that since we're Christians, we ought to be able to help every need there. But a need does not constitute a call, and we need to be able to distinguish between an appeal for cheap labor and a real need that we are called to meet. The emergency special project needs, now these often look like just a special project need, right? They say, I need some help to move, and you ask questions. Oh, that's because the landlord has been foreclosed on, and now you're being thrown out on the street, and it's serious. You need to get help immediately. And that is something that the church does need to help with if they can. So we need to determine, is it really an emergency, or is it just someone asking for help where they should be doing the recruiting to get the help? We don't see as many of these. Certainly, you see, I think what we see in the church is a lot more of the special project needs, people looking for the church to solve their problems, and the long-term needs, because there are a lot of people in our churches who do have long-term needs that need to be met over time. So the long-term needs are normal social relationships have been severed. That's one of the characteristics of it. Widowed, single parents, people with disabilities. These people, they need to be loved more than they need projects done. And this becomes the basis for meeting other pressing needs, is if we can develop a ministry in our church where we can meet these needs, then we have the foundation to meet the other needs in the church. Often we ignore these. We don't see them as needs. Like the case for Teresa, where she was still coming to church. Everybody thought she was doing fine, but she wasn't. She had a deep need. The elderly and the widows in our churches, they're coming to church regularly because it's something they've always done, and we think that they're doing okay, but we don't really know them. We don't know what's going on in their lives. We are good at special projects, one-time needs, partly because it is bounded. We can say, okay, if I just give up this Saturday, I'm done. Right? It's harder to get people to commit to, okay, we will help you meet your need for as long as you have this need. And someone could be a widow for 20, 30 years, and they may have this need for 20, 30 years. And we need, as a church, to be able to meet that need. And so we'll talk about this later, about how we can actually do that in a reasonable way. The catastrophic long-term needs, they're the life-altering event because of total dependence. And that is the most difficult kind to meet. They don't happen frequently, but they can happen, like this woman in Connecticut who was dying of cancer and had these 12 children who needed help. This offers the greatest challenge. It does ask for major sacrifice on the part of the people in the church, and it will go on for years and years. But if you have built in this foundation of meeting long-term needs, the people, partly because people see the benefit and the blessing that comes from helping people over a long term, that you don't get on just at a single Saturday of helping out, that they're able to step up to the plate and help in cases like this. For the case of the dying woman in Connecticut, as I said, it's real. Avon Community Baptist Church near Hartford, Connecticut. And when this woman came, sure enough, she did die a few weeks later from cancer. And all 12 children are either adopted or brought into foster families in that church. And they're still in a family because they see each other every week. They celebrate holidays and birthdays together. And 60 Minutes wanted to do a special on them. They said, no, that's not what the children need. And they were able to meet that need. I'd like to say I'd be able to too, but I don't. So again, to address the needs spectrum, we want to focus on long-term needs. There are two key verses here. James 1:27. We started that off with that on the first slide. Pure and undefiled religion is this, to visit widows and orphans and to keep oneself unstained by the world. I thought I had it written here. I don't, so I'm garbling it from memory. One of the things is that that verse talks about visiting widows. And it's not just going over for a little social afternoon and having tea or something like that together. When the Bible uses the word visit, it's a very dramatic concept. In Exodus 20, verse 5, or Exodus 34, verse 7, God says, I will visit the iniquities of the fathers to the third and fourth generation. It is something that affects you, that it is changing. It's a life-changing incident. And that's visiting for bad. There's also visiting for good. We see in Genesis 18 where God came and visited Abraham and said, and this time I will visit again and Sarah will have a son. So they were visiting for good. And that's what we're doing here. When we visit these widows, we're going there as a team to say, we see this problem and we're going to fix it. We're going to do whatever we can to help meet this need of yours. And it visibly changes them for good. These women, they're typically women who are the care receivers, and they are transformed by these 4 guys coming every month for them. So the purest form of religion is come into a widow's life and change it forever. Also Isaiah 1:17, this is the foundation of good works in the New Testament. Learn to do good. Plead for the widow. Defend the orphan and plead for the widow. So the deeper goal in all of this is to provide people with the love of Christ. The name of the ministry is New Commandment Men's Ministry. Is based on this verse here, John 13:34 and 35. A new commandment I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, all men will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. When people see the love of Christ, they recognize it automatically. Non-believers are hardwired to recognize the love of Christ when they see it in action. And so one of the things we need to ask ourselves is, what makes the love of Christ so unique? How can I show the love of Christ regularly and effectively? So one of the things that we see, this difference between the love of Christ and kind gestures, is a kind gesture is project-oriented, but the love of Christ is relationship-oriented. Kind gesture is a one-time deal. We'll go rake leaves on a Saturday or something. But the love of Christ does not end. Kind gestures have little impact. People forget about that event when it's over, both the people who are participating and to a large extent the people who benefited. But the love of Christ transforms. I've already mentioned Ruth, our care receiver we served for 4 years. She was visibly transformed after a few months. It takes a few months before they realize, yes, these guys really are coming back like they said they would. But she was, when you meet her at church, she was hard to talk to. She'd be off on every other subject and stuff like that because she was so lonely. But when she knew that we were committed to her, she was able to reach out to other people in the church. She started coming to church more often. And she was taking initiative, getting involved in the Ladies' Benevolent Society. And she was just taking initiative with other people and getting to know them better. And so she was visibly transformed in that way. Her doctor said to her after a while, says, Ruth, there's something different about you. You're healthier than I've seen you in years. And she said, she listed a couple of other things that she'd been doing. And she says, no, that's not it. She says, well, maybe it's my tools team. At our church, we called it tools because New Commandment Men's Ministry is a mouthful. So we came up with the acronym TOOLS for Team Outreach to Others and Loving Service. So it's a lot easier to say tools. So if I slip into that, you'll know it's the same thing. She says, it could be my tools team. And I said, what is that? And so she described, well, these guys from my church, they come once a month and they help me out. And he goes, I've never seen anything like this before. Again, people recognize the love of Christ when they see it like that. So, what is it that makes the love of Christ so unique? Well, there are three qualities here that we list. First is personal identification. The second is commitment. And the third is sacrifice. So, personal identification. Christ identified with us by becoming human. Now, he walked among us. And that is, as I work in this, I realize more and more how significant that is. And he didn't just come down and tell the leper, be healed. He touched the leper. He put his hand on him. He ate with people. He was accused of being a glutton and a drunkard. Why? Because he was involved in the people's lives that were scorned by the religious leadership. That's more than just saying, well, I've got a heart for people, I'm going to save them. He was involved in their lives, and that's what he was criticized for. So when you're at this when you're on this team working with this care receiver month after month after month, they come to know you and you get to know them. You know their problems, you know why they have them. And it is that identification that helps build that relationship. The next quality is commitment. Jesus Christ became a human being, and he is still a human being. He has never stopped being human. That is his commitment to us. His love never ends for us. The other thing I wanted to say about identification, the verses that I'm reminded of is how, in Hebrews it talks how we have a high priest who's tempted in all things as we are, yet without sin. He knows what we're going through. So the church, as vessels of Christ, should exhibit this commitment to others, even to those with long-term needs. And people ask, well, how can we possibly do that? And I would say, well, the church does it all the time, only it's usually in the form of a mortgage to a banker, right? We'll commit to a mortgage for 30 years. Well, why can't we commit to a widow for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years? I have an audio clip here that I wanted to share. It's a great story that Herb tells on the DVD, and he tells it better than I, and I usually get choked up if I try to tell it anyhow, so if you'll bear with me, I'll play this here. But it's on the importance of commitment and the difference commitment makes. Is that playing?
We were meeting in McDonald's for our 7, 8 o'clock.
Can anybody hear that?
And one day, this lady who worked behind the counter said to me, "Who are you guys? I said, what do you do?" So I told her. And she said, "Well, I'm a single mom, and I have 4 kids, and I'm all alone." And she got real serious, and she said,
This isn't connected.
"Can you help me?" And I said, "Well, sure." Her name was Connie Lopez. So the next month, we formed a team for Connie. And
This is on this one here.
We met at her home, and she cooked us a Hispanic breakfast. We sat around the kitchen table and ate breakfast with Connie. And then after we finished, we got up and we started serving her. We fixed her dryer and we trimmed some bushes for her. And then one of the men in our team was a mechanic. He noticed that Connie had bald tires on her Conquest van. So he said to Connie, Connie, I can get you some good used tires for your van. Would you like me to do that for you? She said, well, sure. So he took her van and not only replaced the tires, but also did a brake job for her. By the time he was done, actually a kind gesture into the love of Christ. What he said was, so, Connie, what do you want us to do for you next month? She said, next month? And they said, yeah, next month. He said, you're coming back next month? And he said, well, if you'd like us to. He said, well, how long will you come back? And he said, well, Connie, we'll come back as long as you need us to. They said that she immediately started weeping uncontrollably. She couldn't talk. They said that she took the key and she just turned around and walked back into the McDonald's, weeping the entire way. And I said to those guys, you know, you could have been handing out tracts all day long in McDonald's and not have the impact that I'm sure she had when she was explaining to the fellow workers watching. And the next day, Connie was at church.
So I apologize. I thought it was louder than it turned out to be. Could everybody hear well enough? Okay. Now the key was when they said, we'll come back as long as you need us to. She was so affected by that she just couldn't contain herself. And again, that was just one morning, but it was then the promise of morning after morning after morning as long as she had the need. So sacrifice was the third quality. Christ's redemption is the model for our sacrifice. And care receivers need someone to sacrifice for them. The death of Christ was not just redemptive, though, it's also exemplary. 1 John 3:16 says, we know love by this, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brethren. So to show the love of Christ, it calls us not only to commit to this care receiver, but also to sacrifice for them. Mere words offered without support for physical needs is not true love, James 2:16. I was at a missions conference many years ago where a man from Nigeria was speaking. He said they have a saying in Nigeria that says, an empty stomach has no ears. And in many ways, an empty stomach has no mouth either. So as far as sharing the gospel, if my needs are not being met, it is hard for me to be a witness for Christ. But it's so important that we meet the physical needs as well as the spiritual needs. So what does a team sacrifice? What are we talking about here when we say we want this team to sacrifice for them? We try to sacrifice spiritually. We pray for our care receivers. Emotionally, we're involved in them. And I know this doesn't sound like much when we talk about it here, but it really means a lot to them. Time, 3 hours a month. And financially, $10 to $15 each trip. That's usually, I may be jumping ahead of myself, but typically, again, the team isn't there to meet every need for the care receiver. They're there to meet the needs that they can't meet. So, like in the case of Ruth, she was doing okay financially, and she would insist on paying for every penny we laid out. We had to sneak it in, if we wanted to get something for her. But there are some times where they can't pay for something, and then either if it's a few dollars going to Home Depot to get some parts, the team will usually kick that in. The other thing is the Bible talks about us being an advocate for the widows and the single moms. So maybe the team, instead of the boiler goes out in her furnace, and it's the middle of winter time, so they probably don't have the money lying around to buy her a new boiler, but they can look for charities that can meet her needs. And maybe if there are no charities that pan out, they can find government resources. And if there are no government resources that can meet her needs, well, then you go to the church and be her advocate for the church. Say, Helen in our church has just lost her heater, and we need to do something for her. So they can also be their advocate. So there is, in those cases, there is a little extra time commitment. But what you find, though, is that once guys get involved in showing the love of Christ this way, expressing it and experiencing it, they'll do anything for these people. I went back to Ruth's house every month for 4 years because I loved Ruth, not because I was involved in this ministry. It was that way to begin with, but it was because I loved Ruth. So, can it work? Yes, I would say it definitely can work. No church has ever called and said they're unable to meet the needs. And instead we find that they're better to meet other needs because you build this foundation of, again, men seeing the value of committing long-term to people with needs and that you don't have to give up your whole life. You're not marrying this person. You still have your own family to care for, but you can give a little extra time that makes a much greater difference in theirs. I've referred to it a little bit. I'm going to go into more details on the model now. So the way it works is typically the pastor will select the care receivers. Maybe you have a different group in your church that manages the needs in the church. But you create teams of 3 to 4 men per care receiver. And the team is a key issue. There are several reasons you want to have a team of guys. One is, they're going to have unexpected conflicts. I don't think we've ever had a service day where every man has been there. There's sports, business trips, whatever. People will move away, or God may call them to another ministry. As I said, you're not marrying this person. But what the church is committing is we're committing to this person. You will have a team. Over the years or over the months, the members of the team may change, but they will still have a team. And the commitment is still there. Another reason is propriety. Care receivers are typically women. And so you want to have a team of guys to go there for the accountability. We talk in the workbook and on the DVD, there's several suggested policies, and one of them is that no caregiver ever goes to a care receiver's house alone. And there's never in the room alone with the child of a care receiver, no matter the age. So with a team there, you can do that. Once you've formed a team, you create a team caller. So the caller's responsibility is to call the care receiver once a month before the service day and find out what they need to do, remind them of the service day. And then they call the team members, remind them of the service day and say, we're going to be raking, so bring your rakes and tarps and stuff like that, or we're going to be painting, so wear paint clothes and things like and that as well. The advantage of the caller is I don't have to manage a bunch of projects as the person running the ministry. I just have to worry about the team I'm on. Right? If there were 5 teams, it's a lot of work for one guy to go manage all the different projects. So it's spread out among the teams. And the teams return to the same care receiver for as long as they are needed. And again, it's the team that's coming back. It's not necessarily that I am committing. I'm committing as long as I can to be involved. But it's having the commitment of the church can commit to having a team. They can't commit to having each individual there. The teams meet one Saturday a month for 3 hours. Suggested times, it's your ministry. You can really pick the times that work best for you. But 7 to 8, we meet for prayer, planning, building relationships, and travel to the care receiver's home. That hour goes really fast, by the way. Then from 8 to 10, you work at the care receiver's home on whatever they need. While at the care receiver's home, we work on projects. Projects run the gamut. Depends upon the skills you have on your team. We did a lot of raking at Ruth's house. We painted her garage. Actually learned how to use a sprayer. So that's you can get more skills this way if you have people on the team that are more skilled than you are, and you get to practice at somebody else's house rather than your own. So, but it doesn't take any special skills to be involved in this ministry. Typically, it's the fact that you are there is what makes a huge difference. And like I said, you've got other team members to help back you up and help train you to do it. Yes?
Is there an age definition in your groups?
I started with just saying the men in the church, and we found that it works really well to bring sons along because it gives them a chance to see their dad serving somebody. They see other godly men in the church helping. If they can see the ravages of divorce, if it's a single mom, what it's doing to the family. And my boys are involved in the ministry with me, and they've loved it. So now I'm more to say, well, as long as they're contributing, then yes, they can come. And I also require that, if they're younger children or minors, that their dads be involved. I don't want people sloughing off their kids on this. I suppose if they were sons of a single mom, I'd think differently about that. But that's a good question. I think as long as they can contribute, they can benefit from it and make a difference as well. It does get a little trickier with some of the propriety issues because they are minors as well. We also spend some time praying with the care receiver, going through some scriptures together, and for some of them that's a very important part. And we pray for the neighbors of the care receiver. The part of the reason for praying for the neighbors is it helps us branch out into the neighborhood so that it is more than just ministering to the church. We want to minister to the church first. It says, do good unto all men, and especially to those of the household of faith. But we also need to be doing good for all men and want to see the ministry branch out.
I have one other question.
Sure.
And if you're going to get to it, then I'll defer.
No.
In terms of training, I presume that these teams have a leader or someone who kind of
Yeah.
trains the team to be functional in the way you
No, that's an excellent question. What I have done at our church is I started this about the same time Herb put together this DVD. It's an orientation seminar that he used to travel around the country giving to churches, which is very expensive, plus he can only be in one place at a time. So I had our church buy that DVD, and I use it to present the ministry to the pastor and the deacons, and I also have every man go through that because he goes in more detail than I could today on the biblical basis for it and then some of the practical aspects of it. And that's typically all the training they need. Most of the guys know how to work together and get a project done, and that's a large part of it. So some of the benefits are care receivers, physical needs are met. This comes out to almost 100 man-hours of labor per year if you get all 4 guys to show up. You build relationships with the team members, and you build relationships among one another. There's an interesting article in the Wall Street Journal last April called Friendship for Guys, No Tears. And one of the quotes is, researchers say women's friendships are face-to-face. They talk, cry together, share secrets. Men's relationships are side-by-side. We play golf. We play football. We go to football games. And I would add, we work together on projects. We work side-by-side, and that's how we build relationships with other guys in the church, by doing things like that together. So what we have seen is that there's sometimes some initial attrition. As the ministry matures, it grows. Average 37% growth after 2 years. In many churches, it becomes one of, if not the strongest ministry in the church because guys get so fired up about this. And it really is a blast. It's a lot of fun. Significant needs are met. As I mentioned, Ruth was transformed by that, and that's not uncommon. There's another care receiver, Carol. She lived in a 30-year-old mobile home that was designed to last for 20 years. The roof was leaking. We get a lot of snow in New Hampshire. And in the wintertime, the roof was sagging and dripping in, and she was doing what she could to stay dry and keep it warm. And she'd been praying to get into some senior housing for 3 years, and she finally got in and was out of this mobile home. And we heard about it at church, and my wife goes up to Carol, I heard your great news. How'd you hear about it? She says, oh, Paul was on her team, told me that you got in the apartment. She says, that's not my great news. My great news is my son wants to start a tools ministry at his church in North Carolina. So she'd been praying for this for 3 years, and she was more excited about the fact that her son wanted to start this type of ministry. So these are some testimonials I collected just last weekend, in fact, as we met, from guys in our ministry. The best part of being involved with New Commandment Men's Ministry is the joy we feel seeing how what we do blesses our care receiver. It is truly better to give than to receive. The blessings of this ministry have been both expected, the care receiver, and unexpected, the team. We've been drawn together in ways that I didn't expect, didn't realize I needed, and didn't have in my life. many lifetime male brothers that I can count on. Being a part of New Commandments Men's Ministry has been a great experience. Reaching out and becoming a part of a team that serves together has bonded us together. Our care receiver has a sweet spirit, and I find myself looking forward to our outreach days. The New Commandment Men's Ministry has been a powerful and fulfilling ministry for me. Hearing the appreciation and joy the ministry brings to the care receivers has been some of the most satisfying experiences in my life. The way God works in the hearts of those in the ministry has been truly amazing. It is an honor to serve in this ministry. That's from a 17-year-old. The last one I have, this guy's a little long-winded, but the New Commandment Men's Ministry concept opened my eyes to a practical application of an inner desire the Spirit had always laid upon me to help others. The New Commandment Men's Ministry helps us to come alongside those in the most need in the church, the widows and single moms who can so benefit from a team of godly men who will come alongside and give practical hands-on help. New Commandment Men's Ministry also gives a positive Christian male group support team that supports both emotionally and spiritually. It is a practical and safe way to do the things that Christ said we should do. It gives evidence of our faith that neighbors can see. The sacrifice of time and labor once a month is turned into a blessing for care receivers and caregivers on each and every visit and in between. When we're doing the will of God, then His blessing is upon us. So, now what? How am I doing on time? I've got plenty of time. One of the things that New Commandment Men's Ministry is offering is what they call a sample pack. The DVD is normally $70, and we let people try that for 30 days for free. So if you sign up on a sample pack request, I have several of them here. We can send you home with a DVD and a workbook that goes with it, and a devotional guide. And after 30 days, you either pay for the DVD or return the DVD but keep the books. As I said, I found the DVD myself very, very helpful for training the men in the ministry. I've actually had the church buy the workbooks for each man who goes through the training so that they have something physical they can go back to. He covers a lot of the verses in the Bible about taking care of widows and single moms, and don't have time to read all of it in the DVD, but they're in the workbook. 40% of those churches who receive the sample pack actually start the ministry in their church. So, well, I think that's actually probably good that people are willing to say, well, check it out, and maybe it won't work for their church, and maybe it will, rather than assume it won't work. So, but yeah, I'd like to see higher. I'd like to see 100. Although I just told you all that, but that's the details of the sample pack. I'll leave this slide up for a while. These are some different links on the web. The homepage of New Commandment Men's Ministry. Details with focus on the family broadcast, as well as my email if you have any extra questions. I have some of Herb Reese's business cards here with his email if you have questions. Or you can contact me. I'd be glad to help in any way I can. Are there any questions? Yes.
I have 3 questions.
Great.
One is, do you know of anybody, I know it's a men's ministry and a men's
Mm-hmm.
conference, but do you know of anybody that's using this kind of framework in a men's and women's combined?
If you're going to sign up, fill that out and bring it back to the table because there's no address on where to send that. But you can also sign up for the sample pack on the website if you decide to do that later. Okay. Sorry, I'll get to your question. The question was, what about men's and women's? And there are a couple issues with that. Some of the reasons we're focusing on men's. It is first and foremost a men's ministry. The goal is to minister to the men, to get them involved in showing the love of Christ. It is, you often don't have trouble getting the women volunteering at the church. A little more difficult to get the men involved. The other reason we limit it to men is that we're trying to build relationships across the team. We don't want to be building inappropriate relationships between men and women in the church. And an observation my wife made, which never would have occurred to me, says, if I was a care receiver and a woman was coming over to help me, I'd make sure the house was spick and span before they came there. If it's a bunch of guys, I don't worry about it. So it puts a lot less pressure on the care receiver to have it just the men. It's true. And she shared this with other women and they say, oh, yeah, exactly. I clean the house before the cleaning lady comes. But my wife is also a huge supporter of this ministry. She makes sure my calendar is free every service day. And she tells people about it. And she scouts out for, I think so-and-so might need a team. Why don't you check them out? In fact, the care receivers we are currently serving is thanks to my wife. Asking them, do you think you could use a team? And they finally admitted, well, yeah, maybe we could use one. Yes.
Is that the third question?
No, that is only one.
I can alternate or
No, go ahead.
The other one is this framework looks a lot like would be applicable to homeless ministries as well.
Mm-hmm.
Is anybody applying this to like the homeless?
Not that I know of, but you're right. They also have very long-term needs. And, yeah.
My last question was.
If you come up with any adaptations for us, let me know.
Well, I'm thinking about seeing like in where New Hampshire.
I'm in Londonderry, New Hampshire, southern New Hampshire, right near the Massachusetts border. Okay, about an hour east of us. Sorry, James, you had a question as well?
And how do you determine or describe what you guys consider when you get to that point where the need is no longer there? Hopefully they've been empowered in some way, either by what you've done, as a result of what you've done, so that I guess part of
That is a big challenge. That is a big challenge. Usually it's the care receiver that says, I don't need a team anymore. We did have one care receiver where myself and many of the people on her team felt she really doesn't need that much help, but she needed the support of the guys coming back every month. And we tried to have her share with another person so it could meet more needs, and that caused some ill will. She had said before, one of the reasons we picked her as a care receiver, says, my husband died 19 years ago, and the church has done nothing for me. And as a result, her children were not going to church anymore because they'd felt abandoned by the church. And she said that to Herb when he was out visiting our church, and he said, you get a team for her. So we did. But she lived in a condo. She didn't have that many things that need to be done, and the team was teasing her that she was breaking things so they had work to do. But she does still have a team now, a full-time team. It's a smaller team, and it's more for the relational aspect of knowing that somebody is committed to her. Personally. But in general, it's been when the care receiver says, I don't need a team anymore. It's been and we've had that. They say, it's been a great help. It helped me over a hump in my life. Or the case of Ruth, where she said, I don't know if I mentioned this group or somebody at the table, but our care receiver, Ruth, she's in her 80s, and she finally decided that she wasn't safe driving. Or other people around her weren't safe. So she gave up her driver's license. And that made her a lot more isolated, but she used some of her money that she saved up to build an addition on her daughter's home so she could live with her daughter and son-in-law. So at that point, she didn't need a team anymore. Her daughter and her son-in-law were right there for her. That's another thing we do see sometimes, is that as we go help these widows and single moms, their family starts to get more committed to them too, and they show up a little more often. And sometimes we can be a catalyst to say, no, you haven't been around to see your mom for a while, and get the family involved. When I was mentioning being an advocate, that's another group of people the team can work with to be an advocate for widows. Go to see the adult children, see if they can help with a need, financial need. Yes?
And the event the care receiver says, I don't need a team, help nobody. What do the team do? Cut away?
Typically, the team, because they built this relationship with her, or him, but they won't come on the service day, but they will stay in contact. Carol's team, I told her when she graduated to the apartment, her team sees her regularly at church, and they connect with her regularly there. And she has said those guys, I'm older than all the guys on my team, but they're like big brothers to me. They're always looking out for me. And they feel the same about her, that she's always caring for them. There's been a bond of relationship built there. So it does mean now you're spread a little thinner, but you want to do that. So it's still a blessing to you. Yes?
I guess more on the long-term needs. How did y'all find ways to, I guess, provide for the more long-term, in financial and other ways? I can understand, the donation of each member,
Mm-hmm.
for a short period, or just the monthly visits and everything. But in what ways did y'all find, I guess, more successful to be able to take care of more long-term or emergency needs?
Okay. The question I'm repeating for the folks, sake of the CD folks. I haven't been doing a great job, but I'll try to do a better job from the future. The question was more, how do we handle long-term financial needs, where there's a huge financial need that is really more than a team can bear? Is that correct?
Yeah. With children, or somebody goes through a catastrophic life change.
Right. So for the catastrophic needs, the example there were 12 different families. They all said, well, we can take one of the children, either as a foster parent or actually adopt them. And that is a much greater commitment on the part of that family. In our experience, most of the people with the long-term needs, the finances aren't the biggest issue. It's, I'm living in a house, and I just can't keep up with it. It's overwhelming me, and I'm getting depressed about it. And just having the guys come once a month to help do the work for them, that does help financially. They don't have to hire a plumber. They don't have to hire someone to paint the garage. I haven't seen a case where we have had to have a long-term, huge financial commitment. We do have one care receiver who does have a lot of needs, but in that regard, we're not committing to buy her out of her house or something like that. We're committing to being there for her and helping her, with whatever resources she has. And again, the team can advocate for the care receiver and find other resources that are available. We're not asking the team members to adopt this person. Does that make sense? Okay.
Can I have another interesting question?
Oh, sure.
Within your church,
Mm-hmm.
do you all exercise a benevolent, for lack of a better word, ministry? And if so, how does that parallel with some of the things that I'm hearing the teams do, especially
Yeah.
in line with the questions that this gentleman here just asked in terms of finance?
Yeah, so we have a Deacons Fund for the Needy, and the teams have gone to that when there's been an expensive need for a care receiver. The church also manages that by saying they have a limit on how much they'll give to any one individual, just so there's enough left over for other members of the church who have a sudden need. The Deacons Fund is typically used more for the emergency special project needs than a long-term ongoing case where we'll give you $100 towards your rent every month. We don't do anything like that. But if it's, again, my car just broke down and I don't have the money to repair it, the Deacons Fund can be used for stuff like that. Yes, sir.
This may have been addressed earlier when James asked the question, but how do you move people into self-sufficiency down the road?
We've actually found that this type of commitment enables them to become more self-sufficient. What we saw with Ruth was the fact that we were coming month after month gave her the emotional and mental energy to tackle problems she had not been able to tackle before. She was able to straighten out and cleaning up a lot of the clutter that was on her front porch. It was just growing and growing and growing, and she was just overwhelmed by it. And this allowed her to do more for herself. Other than that, there are teams that also work with, helping them to learn how to do things that they couldn't possibly do for themselves. And sometimes you're doing stuff that they normally could do for themselves, but she just slipped on the ice and broke her wrist and can't change batteries anymore. So it's simple thing like that can mean a big difference for them. Yes?
How do you identify the care receivers? Are they from your church or outside your church?
We start with our church because of the directive to do good unto all men, and especially to those who are the household of faith. And as they graduate or as we get more teams, we work towards moving outside the church. Our church has never gotten outside our church. Londonderry Presbyterian Church, they have met all their needs, and they are now have teams going out into the community to people who are not part of their church.
Can they contact social services then?
I'm sorry?
Could they contact social services and say, we're here, we're available?
Yes, they could. And actually, Herb Reese said when he started this in Quincy, the guys got so well known that social services contacted him, saying, we need your help. Yeah.
Have you experimented partnering with other churches?
I have not. I'm sure it happens, and we'll start doing that. In fact, in the very near future. It's a great way to build relationships across the churches, as well, and it's and to help. We're all one body of Christ, and this is something we can serve together. I don't see any reason why that couldn't work.
Okay, so how is the team assembled? According to the skills of the team members or according to the needs of the recipient?
Well, typically, as Herb likes to say, probably the only real thing that matters is that at least one person on the team has a pickup truck. It's really handy. Yeah. I rearrange the teams occasionally, but it's more based on the needs and who's still in the ministry and who's joined and so on. Not so much skills. It's typically there's plenty to be done that the guys can do. Sometimes you can trade off. Like if you have an electrician and someone really needs some electrical work, you can trade them off for a month. Even though the focus is to try to have the same team, so you're building relationships. It's not rigid like that. It's really up to you. We had times where our church where the pastor decides who's on what team. Sometimes I try to put people together who already have a good relationship so they can get better, or sometimes try to mix it up so people get to know other people better. It's
Going back to your example with Ruth, if she were living in a house
mm-hmm.
and you were visiting once a month, I can see two areas where her needs, if she's a shut-in,
Mm-hmm.
are going to be more frequently needed than once a month. She's going to need someone to cut the grass more frequently than once a month, or snow.
Mm-hmm.
What happens in those cases? Can someone pop in and volunteer? Obviously, that's allowed, but I mean...
Right. Well, frequently we saw that the family starts to come by more often and help, and that's part of it. Ruth's grandson was there helping out more often once we started helping. And there have been extra times that we have gone because we've chosen to. I do have to work very hard at guarding the time of the men who are involved in ministry, because it is hard to communicate to you've been a part of it the difference between a relationship-based ministry and a project-based ministry. You get a lot of requests for, so and so needs to move. Can you send some teams of guys over? You're coordinating the teams of guys who like to do projects, and I have to say, no, it's really not that kind of a ministry. You're free to call the guys in the church, and there's a church directory, and so I have to work at guarding their time that way. But if I have that relationship, we will sometimes go over more frequently, and that's sometimes a sign that they will want to be moving into an area where they can get better support around the clock. We do tell the care receivers that if you have an emergency, call these guys. You have their number. That's the other thing. It's a safety net for them. They know if something catastrophic happens, they have a number to call. But I don't know. Very rarely do they they take people up on that. It's not. It's. I've never heard of it being abused.
There's this natural human tendency to, especially in part of people who are heavily in need,
Mm-hmm.
that responsibilities assumed become responsibilities assigned.
Yep.
And it's the expectation now that they're going to meet almost everything, including do the dishes and everything else.
Yeah. Yes, there is and that's a judgment call by the team, but you are there to meet unmet needs that they cannot meet, not every need. There was a case of a care receiver who expected the team to install air conditioning for them. Well, no, that's not what that's about. But if there's something that you cannot meet, we'll do what we can to meet it. Yes?
I can see that the team caller person is a real interesting position because they're the ones that are going to have most of the contact. And that's the person who's going to have to be able to direct people who need building services, ground maintenance kinds of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
versus, here's a contact at social services for whatever those kinds of things are available. So that person has to be pretty knowledgeable of what's going on in the community, as well as has some support from the church that says, this person's calling me every other day. They need food stamps, and now they need child care, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So there needs to be a means of protecting, I think that's a strong word, but supporting that team caller as well.
Yeah, the question was about overburdening the team caller with requests, and again, it's the whole team that's serving this care receiver. The team caller is the point person frequently, and what we have done is we've sometimes rotated that responsibility. I'll do it for a year, then the next person will do it for a year, or so on. And again, we haven't seen that many care receivers be that demanding. They're so appreciative that the church is showing an interest in them.
Well, maybe we're doing something wrong. We got involved in projects in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Snowballs into cutting the grass, finding a job.
Yeah.
We don't mind doing some of those things, but it's never quite enough.
Right.
Try to get them to self-sufficiency.
Yeah, you're right. That is the goal. You're trying to work yourself out of a job. And yes.
That brings up, I guess, another interesting. I'm assuming this is a system where it's above and beyond your normal men's ministry. This is either, or is this a substitute or an extension of your ministry?
I've seen both. There's some churches where they don't have a men's ministry, so it's a great way to get it started. And it's also a good way to bring in guys who are on the periphery of the church. Normally be too embarrassed to pray out loud, but they'd be glad to cut wood with a chainsaw or something like that. They know they can do that. There are times where it is in addition to a men's ministry. It's an option that the guys have, and that's the way it was at our church. It frequently becomes a very healthy ministry because it's something that really serves the men as well as the other members of the church. A lot of it depends on where your church is. If you don't have a men's ministry, it's a great way to get one started, and it can grow into something more. For example, you've already got teams of men there who are meeting once a month that could easily develop into a weekly Bible study with those guys because they're building those relationships. Yes?
Caring for Ruth and her family is part of the overall policy of the church.
Mm-hmm.
The church has gotten different type of departments, including the women department, the men department. What was the rule or the coordination between the men's ministry and the women's ministry in taking care of?
Well, in taking care of Ruth, there really wasn't any. It was just a need that she had to have someone look out for her. And since we were building this ministry, we said, well, she's one with one of the greatest needs, particularly for her house. It was also an older mobile home. And so that's why we assigned a team for her. that enabled her to get involved in more of the women's ministries in the church. Did that answer your question? Or I mean, we didn't have it compartmentalized as much that it had to be the women's ministry who were helping her, because her needs are more for what the men were good at doing, painting and fixing her well and things like that.
Her problem was an income. She had an income that was okay.
Yes.
So she needed to go to the doctor. She can call a cat thing.
Right.
But she didn't.
Or her daughter, or her daughter would take her there. Right.
Do y'all enlist, I guess, the use of like women's ministry or an auxiliary for certain needs?
We haven't yet. We just have not had the need to. It's my wife and I have talked about it because there's some women in the church who are elderly in particular, who they live in a nice condo, they don't have any real work done, but they're still lonely. They need someone to visit them. And seeing the commitment that this ministry has had for the other people in the church helps us think that would be another good branching out of the ministry. Sorry, there's another question back here. Kevin?
In our church here, we're looking for opportunities for our men to get plugged in, and we're trying to take our men's ministry to a position where it's not the church ministering to the men, but the men ministering to the church.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking for get my guys in the periphery pulled into the church to
Mm-hmm.
get opportunities. So in your church, in your example, what's the size of your church and how many teams do you have out there, just to give me kind of a ballpark for the effectiveness to get reached out?
Our church was about 250 people, and we had at one point about 25 men serving. Actually 6. We had a few that were a little on the thin side. Like that one woman who really didn't need much work done. She only needed 2 guys on her team that could very faithfully, month after month, go there. We rely on them. Our church actually went through a very difficult split recently, but the ministry kept going. The numbers dropped, but we have people who stayed with the church and people who left with the church are still meeting together to study the Word together and to serve people. Yeah, it was a very difficult time, but it is what it is.
One last question I have.
Sure.
How does a new member hear about this ministry?
A new member in the church? Well, we put it in the bulletin. The other thing people do is once a quarter or something, have a team come up with their care receiver and share about it. You've seen the testimonials from the guys, and the care receivers are just as excited about it. They come into church, they're beaming because someone finally has taken notice of them and caring for them. So, if there are any other questions? Well, thank you very much. Thank you for all your questions. And I'll be out at the table there, and if anybody wants to sign up for a sample pack, as I said, I have a few with me today. You can take it home with you. I have Herb's business card, which has the website, so you can go back, you can sign up for the sample pack on the website at a later date if you prefer.
I trust that this message has challenged you and motivated you to take bold steps of faith to advance the kingdom. We are thankful for the help and support we've received on these recordings from Morris Audio Consulting. Visit them on the web at morrisaudioconsulting.com. We also hope you'll take time to learn more about Noble Warriors and the Iron Sharpens Iron Men's Conference Network by visiting noblewarriors.org. God bless you, friend.